it doesn't look to me like pornography is really a very good idea. I don't think it's helping anyone. Now, there might be codicils to that, freedom of expression, some potential educational utility, the pleasure that's a consequence of sexual utilization of pornographic material. But I would still say, seeing all that it's not a net social good. It doesn't do the people who produce it or who consume it any good. And I don't believe that anyone feels like a better human being after utilizing pornography for sexual gratification. Now, you might say, well, that's because they've been shamed about sex since they're born, and and that's a consequence of our crooked culture. And in a utopian world, we wouldn't have that shame. And no, it's way more complicated than that. And I read something in one of the YouTube comments in my video the other day. I was talking to Abigail Schreier about the apparent fact that today's teenagers are having much less sex. One person commented that there's the shame that men feel when sex is a spectator sport rather than a participatory act. And then you think, well, the mere fact that you're watching two other people, one of whom isn't you, having sex instead of having sex, really implies something either about it implies something about your desirability. It's pretty hard to shake that, isn't it? Or your courage. Why is it that you're sitting there alone at night with your laptop on your lap? What the hell's wrong with you? Well, nothing. It's just we should dispense with sexual shame. It's like, no, probably not. That's probably not the answer. I think it's reasonable to assume that there's a novelty edge in pornography, like there is in so many quasi-addictive phenomenon. And so it has to become, because novelty is a sexual kick, it has to stay novel, and that means that over time it's going to become more extreme. So that's not good. Well, so how do you resensitize yourself in some sense? Well, you stop. And then hopefully you recover. And then you deprive yourself of that outlet, let's say. And you might say, well, is that absolutely necessary? And maybe there's nothing wrong with pornography. It's like, well, I don't know, man. Like, have you ever really met a guy who is proud of that? Like, you know what I mean? That makes him feel like, I'm the guy, man. I'm watching pornography and getting off. It's like, what a man. I don't believe anyone feels that. And to me, maybe I'm wrong. And to me, that's an indication that, yeah, we know. No, it's pretty cheap. It's cheap. It's easy. And, I say that knowing that I believe the research evidence shows that if you introduce pornography into a community, that rates of sexual crime committed by men upon women actually decline. So there is perhaps some utility in the outlet. But, that's a unidimensional analysis and doesn't take into account all the other effects of pornography. So, including the ones you described. And I think that those are real. It makes sense that they're real, because it's super satiation. And it's a non-trivial technological problem. It's now possible for young men to look at more beautiful nude women in one day than any man has ever seen, prior to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, than any man in history had ever seen. That's not nothing. That's something. And to think that doesn't do anything to you, it's like, no, that likely does something to you. So don't substitute the false for the real. And don't underestimate the utility of deprivation. What do we need to drive us forward to have the adventure of our life? Well, some deprivation, that's for sure. That heightens desire and drive. And maybe you need that. You're afraid to approach a woman. Well, you remove part of your drive with pornography. And so now you don't have that sexual urge to overcome that anxiety. And so you stay timid for your entire life. Maybe not, but but maybe.